Hi, everyone. We've just seen a case from German which illustrated nicely that the process of onset formation was necessarily word-bounded. Consonants could not be taken from a preceding morphosyntactic word and added into the onset of a following morphosyntactic word. Let's now contrast the German case with the behavior of syllabification in Turkish. So we can think back to the data that we discussed in last class concerning abstractness, in which we found the following voicing alternations in Turkish. Saw that the underspecified segments underspecified for voice became voiceless at the end of a word, but became voiced between vowels. The truth is actually that these rules behave a bit differently. If you look at the original sources, you'll see that in fact the specification for voicelessness occurs at the end of a syllable, but the specification for becoming voiced occurs at the beginning of a syllable if the two segments, if the segment is between two vowels. So let's now determine the bounding domain of the syllabification process of onset formation and coda formation in Turkish in order to obtain the correct outputs. So we'll look at the phrases that are output as şarap, şarap sattı, and şarabaldı in this case. So just as we have always done, we can begin by building syllables. So in the first instance, let's just look at the first instance, the word şarap occurring on its own. Remember here that the large letter P stands for a labial segment that is underspecified for voice. It needs to receive the features for voice here. So in the first instance, we're going to find two syllable nuclei, two plus syllabic segments that will make the syllable nuclei. And then it looks like onset formation will probably apply as normal, providing the onsets sh and ra. And then this pa has no place to go except in the coda of the second syllable. And because it is in the coda, the voicing process, which is phrase bounded, in fact, will apply and make this into a voiceless segment. So giving us in the end, şarap. And it looks like something similar must happen in the following. Let's actually now look over to the following, to the last example, because that's actually the crucial case. So in that case, we have the same, the word şarap will have two syllables, and the word aldı will have two syllables built around it. Now, the really interesting thing that happens is here. So remember here, for a segment to become voiced, it needs to be in the onset of a syllable immediately preceding another vowel. So what does this tell us about where this underlying underspecified labial segment is placed? It must be added to the, since it becomes voiced, that means that it must be added to the onset of this syllable of the word of the morphosyntactic word aldı. So that tells us that onset formation must be cannot be word bounded. If it were word bounded, then this pa would be placed in the coda of the second syllable of the word for wine, and it would necessarily come out as voiceless. That means we are going to then obtain the following onsets. So when onset formation occurs, let's add another line for onset formation. We will have sha, ra, and crucially, the underspecified labial stop here is placed into the onset of this syllable. And then the da, there, that's all normal. And then finally, coda formation will place the remaining segments into codas. The only consonant that has not been syllabified at this point is the L here. And now when the devoicing is not able to apply because there are no underspecified obstruents in the in the coda of a syllable, but instead voicing will apply. Voicing will apply and change this, give the value plus voice here. Good. So the crucial difference here is then that the crucial difference between Turkish and German is that Turkish onset formation is phrase bounded, or possibly even utterance bounded. We can't really tell from these instances since we don't have any examples in which there's a phrase boundary. Okay, now let's consider a bit more how the ordering of segments could affect what happens in building up our syllables. Now, in all of our examples thus far, we've just assumed that syllabification applied before all other phonological rules. But this doesn't always derive the correct results. And in particular, when there are rules that add segments or remove segments, so rules of epenthesis or deletion, or rules that change the values of the feature of syllabic, then it often turns out to be the case that languages change the syllabification. When we see such changes in syllabification, we say that syllabification behaves in a persistent fashion. That is, after the application of any rule, then the rules of syllabification apply again and change the syllable, the syllabic formation. So let's imagine the difference here. We'll assume the same underlying structure, but we'll work with a couple different rules and rule orderings. So we have the same processes, vowel deletion and devoicing, and we can see what happens if syllabification applies after each rule, or if both of the rules apply before syllabification. So if we first apply syllabification in general, we're going to find the syllable structure ka, bi, dog. Fine. Vowel deletion says that a vowel is deleted between two other vowels. That means that this vowel I is going to be targeted. Vowel deletion will remove vowel E, the second vowel. So let's remove those syllable boundaries. And now syllabification will need to apply again. And we might expect here, I would expect for a syllable boundary to be placed there between the two obstruents, assuming that the onset bda is not allowed in this language. And that allows the devoicing rule to apply, which says that a consonant becomes voiceless in the coda of a syllable. So that will become kap dog instead. If we consider the other possibility instead, namely that first syllabification applies, then if devoicing tries to, I forgot to devoice the g at the end of this word. So we have kap dok at the end. If devoicing then applies at this phase, now just the ka at the very end of the word will be affected because only that underlying ga is in the coda of a syllable. Then once, since devoicing hasn't affected, can't have affected syllable structure at all, we'll wait. Now when vowel deletion applies, we obtain kab dok, and at that point it's now too late for devoicing to devoice this ba which is going to be in the coda of a syllable. So in the first example, there was a feeding relationship between vowel deletion and devoicing. Vowel deletion put more segments into syllable codas and allowed devoicing to apply. Whereas in this example, there was a counterfeeding relationship. In the second case, there's a counterfeeding relationship between devoicing and syllabification. All right, at this juncture, we can take another break before we start to look at some of the typical sorts of organizations of syllables and possible onsets and codas cross-linguistically.